the great game was the tug of war between two great empires, the Russian Empire, the Soviet Russian Empire, and the British Empire, and that game was being played before World War One, something like from 1850s to 1907, something like that. And what was happening in the Great War, Great Game was in Asia, the British Empire was occupying the subcontinent, and from up in the north, Russia was occupying something like all of the Central Asian countries. And it was there was actually only two states that were left independent in Asia between the British and the Russians, and those two countries were Persia, that is Iran, and Afghanistan, had not been colonized. They were, on the face of it, they were independent countries. And Britain was afraid that the Russians are going to come take over Iran and Afghanistan and then attack them. And in the same way, the Russians were afraid that if they don't act, the British Empire is going to like conquer Iran and Afghanistan, and then they are going to come right at their borders and then attack them. So both of them, the Russian Empire and the British Empire, had this tug of war to, like, not, they didn't want to uh, occupy these two countries, but they wanted their influence, and they wanted to keep these two countries as buffer zones, a buffer zone between these two empires, so that none of the empire enters there and comes like face to face in a direct battle with the other. And for that thing, they kept on influencing the courts of the Afghan kings and the courts of the Persian kings. And it was such a the game was so severe that for so many years and decades, the court of the Persian king used to be they had to allow the Russian, envoy to be stationed in their courts, and they had to allow the British envoy to be stationed in their courts. And they were so close to this their system, the political kingship system, that they actually forced the kings to do as the crowns wished. Like the Russians influenced the king to do as they wished, and the British did the same. And the kings were so, because Russia was occupying a belt of the border areas of Iran, and the British were also having this type of an influence. And the economies of both of these countries was really weak, and because of that, they were ready and happy to take rent from the British Empire and take rent from the Russian Empire. So they became tenants of these two empires. So that you can imagine, if a king becomes a tenant of some other people, he's taking stipend from them and taking monthly, financial aid from them. So then what is going to be the sovereignty of that empire, or the independence of that empire? So that was the tug of war that the Russian and the British Empire both played in both Afghanistan and Iran. And so it was a long story, very interesting story, very deep history in that. But at the end, in 1907, they agreed that yes, we both are not going to enter these two countries. We'll make it a buffer zone. But you know what happened, that Iran was literally divided into three zones. The upper zone, northern zone, was totally in Russia's influence. The southern zone was totally in British influence. So that was the dire situation in which these two kingdoms had to remain, although they were two kingdoms and two empires that did were not colonized. They were not colonized. They were not enslaved, but by other means, by all other means, they were like enslaved politically and economically and all in all those ways. So that was really an interesting thing. We can talk about the Great War, and then when this all happened and ended, and then was World War One, and then World War Two, and then they after World War Two there was a Cold War, and in the end of this Cold War there was a Russian occupation of Afghanistan, and at the time people started saying that now this is the new great game. This is the great game 2.0. And in that game, when Russian forces were totally inside Afghanistan, British, MI6 and CIA, they were all also in Afghanistan, and via Pakistan, they tried to do all the influence, and they did everything to defeat Russia in Afghanistan.